Let's start.
Perfect. Hello, hello. Hello, everyone. It's so nice to be here in the lovely foundry all together here. Oh, we have to turn it on? Hello, hello. Okay. Do you want me to use the mic, or are you happy without the mic? Give me like a rough hands. Hands for mic, no hands for no mic. Mic. Okay, cool. It's so nice to be here. Thank you, Gcore, for organizing this. We're gonna have an amazing, fun, chill panel here with us. We've got amazing co-hosts, Clara and Christos here. And we're gonna get started with the first question. What should we prioritize going forward when it comes to AI, cloud and AI here? Should we enhance well-being, improve company culture, or retain talent? What is the priority here when it comes to these fields? I'm actually going to ask this question to our panelists as well while you're answering it. Just a brief answer, as we're going to be doing the questions somewhat quickly. Clara, I'm going to ask you first. What is something which we should prioritize going forward between well-being, company culture, and retaining talent? Of course, these are all three which we want.
I mean, I think it'd be unbecoming of me if I didn't say enhancing well-being. I'm just going to go without the mic because the mic doesn't seem to be working. So, of course, enhancing well-being is the obvious choice. That being said, there are far too many voices in the building of AI infrastructure and AI policies, and not all of them knowledgeable. So I'd like to follow that up with retaining talent. I think it's very important that we have those knowledgeable in the industry shaping the infrastructure going forward, especially when it comes to shaping policy in the European Commission and worldwide.
Wow, that's perfect. And Christos, what are we prioritizing going forward?
I'm a politician, so I'm going to go with enhancing well-being since this is what you guys want.
Very, very true. Should we do one more question and then we'll ask our panelists? So this is a broad one. We've got who controls AI today? Who do you think controls AI? This is in all fields of AI. Are we talking about US hyperscalers, governments, or private enterprises? I'm going to ask Christos here what he thinks first.
What's the difference between private enterprises and US hyperscalers if all the private enterprises currently are US hyperscalers?
This is a very, very good question, and I'm hoping that you're also going to be able to tell me.
It's clear, I think, from this graph that nobody actually believes that governments control the AI stack, or that we believe that regulation is enough to be able to rein in AI. US hyperscalers definitely have a huge advantage, but of course, yeah, you can't discount China at the moment. But I would argue at the moment the US definitely dominates. But we still have Mistral in Europe. Let's see what we do with that.
Actually, I've got a great question about Mistral, but first I'm going to hear from Clara.
NVIDIA. No, but I mean, it's not just US hyperscalers, but definitely private enterprises, including some European, which we will talk about momentarily.
So, as you can see, we're already hearing between European, US, all of these things. I guess we should come to the question at hand. When we're talking about cloud to sovereign and to have sovereign AI in a sovereign cloud, is Europe ready for its own AI infrastructure? But before we can even begin this discussion, I think I want to ask, to set the stage, the background to the audience, what is sovereignty? Christos, do you have an answer for what is sovereignty?
Yeah, sure. I'm looking around the room and I'm kind of moved, first of all, by just how many faces I see that are so familiar to me. Because for the last 5 years, you guys have shown up whether I'm creating a TV show or running for office or building a company. So I have to say, I'm thankful. I feel like I shouldn't be talking like I'm in a panel because I'm talking to friends. But what is sovereignty? There are some Greek faces in the room, so you will understand what I'm about to say. 205 years ago, my ancestors decided to put up a banner and say Eleftheria ή θάνατος. Eleftheria ή θάνατος. It was an E in the middle, and it was binary, freedom or death. Freedom to determine our own future. Freedom to determine how we govern our societies. Freedom to take decisions about our own rights, take decisions about what kind of education we want, take decisions about what we aspire to be as a people. Eleftheria ή θάνατος, freedom or death. Freedom is sovereignty. People who are not free are not sovereign. The ability to govern ourselves is sovereignty. So when AI comes into play, which we'll talk about later, if we're not able to shape the very tools that don't have consciousness yet to think of consequences, but are still shaping a lot of our own decision-making, then we're not free. So sovereignty is freedom, the freedom to decide for yourself, the freedom to self-govern. Sovereignty is independence. That's it for me.
Wow, that was amazing. Clara, can we just have a hand here? Just... Freedom is sovereignty. Clara, what is sovereignty?
Well, I think it's difficult to follow after that answer. I think, in a much less impactful way, Luxembourg, since we're here in Luxembourg today, our slogan, "Wir bleiben was wir sind," or "We'll stay what we are." Apologies for my Luxembourgish. I think that's, it's been very regulation heavy in Europe, and I think that many people can see that as a hindrance. But, we remain on that path, of regulation-intensive policy, moving with incredible foresight, sometimes a little bit too much of potential consequences. But for AI, that is not only important, but it's necessary. So sovereignty, AI sovereignty in Europe is, the ability to regulate as we see fit, the ability to not be impacted by the lack of regulation, especially from US companies that are dominating the AI sphere at the moment. So sovereignty for AI, it's being able to control your data, control how your data is being managed, where your data is stored, how your data can be accessed. That's what I would say the answer is for sovereignty, but specifically focusing on AI.
Okay. Wow, that's amazing. So speaking about sovereignty, could you say that it's like an island where everything that is made in the island stays within the island and is consumed by the people of the island? Would you say that this is like an analogy that we can use here when it comes to sovereignty? No? Christos, why not?
Sovereignty doesn't mean not being interdependent. It just means being self-sufficient enough to be able to act as a global player, to be able to trade with others, to be able to exchange goods and services, but without being absolutely dependent. The moment you become dependent, then you're no longer sovereign. That's it.
So then would you say that like being sovereign and globalization are not two different like opposing sides, but they're effectively something which can both happen? You can have sovereignty, you can be sovereign, and you can go towards globalization as well. Clara, how is that balance struck?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I don't think when we're talking about a European sovereign AI, we're not talking about an isolated European sovereign AI. I mean, to be real, at Gcore, we service many European and US-based clients and global clients as well. So it's not about Europe being isolated. It's about Europe being sovereign, having the ability to control its own narrative and how its data is being used and how we, use the data of the companies that use our services, et cetera, but also expanding. So, servicing, being a global player, really. It's about being competitive on the global scale. So far, the US has dominated the tech sphere in many aspects, not in all, but in many, and definitely in AI. And the goal here is that Europe doesn't need to be dependent on US hyperscalers. We don't need to be dependent on US cloud companies. We can have our own, we can be sovereign in that sense, and also supply those services to the world. There are plenty of US companies that don't want to be beholden to the Cloud Act and would therefore also like to store their data in Europe and also like to use European cloud services. And we're seeing that more and more.
So realistically, Europe can reduce its reliance on these US hyperscalers and AI providers. How should they proceed, or how would they go about it? Are there any recent developments in the field?
Sure. So it's not about how we will, it's about how we are. So currently, I'll start with the three obvious companies that were actually prominently mentioned during this year's NVIDIA GTC in San Jose. You have, of course, Gcore. Gcore, we operate tens of thousands of GPUs around the world, in Europe, but also globally. And then, of course, there's Nebius. I'm sure everyone here is familiar with Nebius. They just recently announced a 310 megawatt project, an AI factory in Finland. So it's not about how we're going to in the future, it's about what we're doing now. And the reality is that Europe is already a massive player in the AI infrastructure sphere. And more we're seeing not only European companies, but global companies rely on European resources, in part because of the regulation that has, in the past, hindered European progress, is now one of our biggest assets.
Wow, that's amazing. So we have these projects, we have these plans. Just as recently as 3 months ago here in Barcelona, lovely, lovely Barcelona in Europe, we had MWC, the Mobile World Congress, take place. And there they announced a new project. It's going to be the first pan-European infrastructure project that's going to take place. 70 organizations in Europe, led by Telefónica, the largest telecom group there in Spain, have come with this new project called Euro 3C, where they're going to ask for 75 million in funding to be able to connect AI infrastructure across Europe to be able to make one centralized product. Christos, what do you think will happen with this project? We're talking that we've got these projects in Finland where we're able to build these large data centers, and how will they be connected to have one European sovereign AI and cloud infrastructure?
It's interesting because from the way that I see things, which are social, political, it's like you're asking me to look at what's under my shoe when everyone's talking about this room. The number alone in my small brain makes no sense. 75 million to do that. I am not a technical expert on building AI infrastructure, but 75 million doesn't sound like enough when it comes to the numbers that we keep hearing globally about the level of investment in AI. So maybe I'll look under my shoe and there's a rock there, but I don't know what I'm going to do with it.
Wow, so the 75 million is not at all going to be enough to be able to compete with US and China on a global scale.
Yeah, I mean, 75 million is an astronomically small number when it comes to deploying AI infrastructure, especially to this scale. But I don't think that the future of AI infrastructure in Europe isn't going to be one large connected AI supercomputer regulated by the European Commission or some sort of interconnected body. That's not, I don't necessarily think that's going to be the future. There's going to be AI infrastructure across different countries in Europe that are managed independently, but are going to be operating under a very concrete and uniform framework and set of regulations. That is going to be the future of AI in Europe. It's more about GDPR compliancy. It's about setting standards for metadata, setting standards for training. That's really going to be how we are having a European umbrella sit on top of this AI infrastructure. It's not all going to be one large interconnected supercomputer, though, of course, there are going to be initiatives across different European countries, but it's really more about the regulation. So the European Commission has set aside a lot of funding for projects. So there's the EU AI Factories project. And what that is doing, it's not necessarily setting up, again, one interconnected large supercomputer. It's more about saying, okay, we are going to help fund these different initiatives. We're going to fund European projects, whether they are in Spain or in Luxembourg or in Germany. But here are the regulations that they have to follow, and this is what they have to support, and they have to set aside a certain amount of funding for research, and it has to, of course, be GDPR compliant, and it has to follow certain regulations for data storage and data compliancy. So, I think we're going to see more and more regulation European-wide, but not necessarily interconnected one large supercomputer. And yeah, as Christos says, 75 mil is definitely not enough to even begin to start that idea. So.
Perfect. Like, don't you love to hear the lovely European regulation which we have and we thrive on, these core European values which we've got. There are some critics and skeptics about this. Specifically, when it comes to the regulation, these things, they're done phenomenally well. And to do things well, you often have to trade off with time. And it ends up being that, we'll just have a quick aside for the poll. Which implementation model makes the most sense for Europe? Will you have a fully centralized one? This is to go off the topic which we have just discussed. A hybrid model, which is going to be national plus centralized coordination, or a market-led private infrastructure. What do you guys at the audience see? We've heard from our panelists here that we're expecting it to be somewhat centralized, we'll have the same regulations, but they'll be their own independent thing. So somewhat like a hybrid model. But when we're coming back to the regulations which we see and the whole criticisms about it, in the AI field, it moves really, really quickly. And we need regulation that's able to move quickly and adapt to the challenges and the situations which we're facing now. One quick example of this, to just look back in our European timeline, is the European Green Deal, which was there of 2019. It was made to solve the problems of 2015, 16, 17. And then by the time it came and it was going good, then we had several black swans happen. First, we had COVID hit. Then we had Ukraine, Russia. And now we've got the Strait of Hormuz. We made this energy plan at a time when we had an access of food, let's say. We have so much. We have an access of food. So we made this regulation to be able to solve it. Now the situation is changing. We've made this diet plan, we've got an access of food. There's no more access of food, but we're still sticking to our strict diet regime of what we want to do. And then ultimately, our stomach is hungry, we're still hungry, there is no more food, and we're still sticking to our diet. By the time that we are able to actually use this regulation and everything, it doesn't really hold up. It's not ended up being there, even with the slight modifications which have been there throughout the years. So now my question is to the panel. Will we see a similar situation when it comes to first developing this European regulation, which we do, with the lovely democratic debates which we have? Or should we do a just try it approach and then we end up see what ends up sticking, like how they do in Silicon Valley? So I'm going to open this up with Clara first, and then we'll hear for Christos.
So as much as I, have applauded over the last few minutes regulation, I do want to make a quick clarification that, on the other side, the other panel that we just had here, definitely, I believe in the privatized and market-led approach. And that's not some sort of ethical proclamation and more just realistic. There's only so much funding that the European Commission can provide. There's only so much funding that municipalities can provide. Where the money comes from is the private market, this private enterprise. So, it has to be private market-led and private enterprise-led. So we already have a regulatory framework in place, and the European Commission is not shy about introducing frameworks and suggestions for us to follow. That being said, it has to be influenced by market demand, and it has to be influenced by the private enterprises. And just a quick example of that and how this works in tandem. Right now, we're seeing a lot of smart city infrastructure pop up around the world and in Europe. The European Commission is funding that, But essentially, it is private companies that are being involved in those projects that are pushing it forward. So here in Luxembourg, we have a smart city project called Smart Spires, where we're deploying towers with AI compute inside and cameras. And where the European regulation comes in here is there is never going to be any facial recognition data transferred from the cameras to the servers. That will never happen. So the servers will not even have the ability to store any personal identifying information. That is the regulation that GDPR imposes. That is the regulation that comes from Europe. However, it is still a private, and of course there's funding from the European Commission, but it is still a private company that is building out the infrastructure, that knows what the market needs, and that will eventually be profiting off of that infrastructure. So it has to be a cooperation of both, where the private enterprises are leading that discussion, are understanding what the market need is, and organically following to meet that need, because it will eventually result in a profit that allows us to expand. And the European Commission is there, and not just the European Commission, but European entities are there to ensure that we follow the regulation and to learn where is the market going and how can we assist in making sure that that's regulated. And this is integral that Europe is at the forefront for this, because if you imagine a similar project like this in the US, this is coming as a dual citizen. I care very deeply about my country. That being said, the US doesn't care. The private companies do not care. If there's facial recognition data being taken, it doesn't matter. So if that is the precedent that is set, then that is the precedent that will be adopted worldwide. If Europe can set the precedent, if our private markets can reach that area first, if we can push that market first, then we can set a precedent with regulation that also takes into consideration the ethics and data regulation, while at the same time meeting the speed that the market needs.
Wow, perfect. So we need Europe to come up with all of the industry standard regulations, which then the world will follow. So when it comes to regulations, Christos, do you think that we in Europe will be able to move fast enough to be able to keep up with all of these recent developments in AI? Like just today, there are like so many banks which are like almost like shutting down like some of their things just because they're scared of the Anthropic Claude mythos that like they're able to like crack and find these like cybersecurity vulnerabilities. And like all of these are happening in real time. When it comes to like regulation, will we be able to keep fast enough? Will it help us in Europe to be able to have these set first before we start funding and building?
Be honest.
I suppose. Look, these are two big questions, and I admire Clara for leading the Smart Spires project in Esch, right? And it's an impressive project, people-shaped project. That there's so many things that I want to say right now. My mind is running in the same, all of the tracks at the same time. So let me start to contextualize with money, because I agree that the private market has a huge responsibility. And when we say the private market, what are we talking about? You're the private market. Most of you here are working age and you pay a pension system, right? And where do most of our taxpayer money go? Where do they go? Your money is going to flow into the US to fund US companies, right? We are the ones funding the American tech machine. Not that others are not, but we are. So first of all, we need to get better. There's a lot of regulations that don't exist just within the AI and tech scope that need to enable Europeans to invest in Europe. Unless we get that right, discussing the top layer means nothing when you don't know the denominator. Okay, what was in the second part of my mind? Oh, the speed. Julia pulled me from a ministerial meeting. She told me I had to come back earlier. I would have had more information for you if I had sat on that meeting, but we were briefing on the state of affairs just before. If you knew, and some of you in this room know, the state of politics in this country, you would be more alarmed. Are we going to be fast enough to regulate? I see Marco is pretending to yawn so that he doesn't laugh. No, we're not going to be, because we don't have the knowledge. We don't have the knowledge, and the best people and the most knowledgeable people don't take the time to get invested into engaging in politics. We take so much for granted. So we don't know. Who do you think is regulating? In Luxembourg, I will tell you, it's the Bauer, what is it called in English? The farmer who was very popular in his village, who got elected, and he gets a say, and he's going to get a memo, and someone's going to say, well, this is what we need, this is what we're going to do. Guys, you have no idea. When we say we trust in a regulation, you have no idea who's voting on your regulation. You don't know what's in your regulation. I hope I don't get canceled, because I just realized this is being recorded. And from your glasses, thank you very much. Yes, great. So no, I don't believe we are at speed with regulation. What we need is twofold, though, or threefold. Yes, we need a change in regulation that will allow us to invest in Europe, a change in regulation and what it means to be building our own tech stack. Both cloud, we shouldn't underestimate cloud. We're focusing very much on AI in this discussion. Cloud matters a lot. But what is paramount is what we're building. Whether you're building Skillberg, or whether you're building Monnett, or other startups being built here. I mean, Guy is building a company to help us accelerate in creating EU Inc. companies once they come out. I hope I'm not giving it away. If we don't have our own companies, if we don't have our own data layer, if we don't have our own applications, we can have all the stack in the world. It's just the chairs you're sitting on, but you didn't come here for the chairs, and the chairs are not what's important. We need our own chairs, but we also need what's happening on top of these chairs, on top of the infrastructure to be ours. And I hope that we'll see more startups. And it's also part of the reason why I'm so thankful to Gcore, who they really are a global company. They serve people all around the world. They don't have to be doing a community event in Luxembourg, and yet they're doing that because they're supporting our ecosystem here. They're supporting all of us here who are building companies, taking a risk, subsidizing us in a way by giving us credits. And that's what we need. We need European companies supporting each other.
We need European companies supporting each other. That's an amazing sentiment. I'm going to ask you one more question, Christos. You talked about the startup landscape here in Luxembourg. Why is it so important for them to have their own sovereign cloud here in Luxembourg, like one which is provided by Gcore? Why not just use AWS? Why not use any other competitor which exists to be able to do this service?
There are many ways to answer that question. Clara mentioned earlier the C word, the Cloud Act. US companies are obliged to comply with US regulation, which means that even if we build European applications, US companies, US hyperscalers, US hosting providers, if they ask AWS or Google, you have to give all the data from Monnett to us, because we need to do some analysis, because Donald Trump woke up and decided that, I don't know, Monnett is harboring terrorists. I don't know. They have to do that. Gcore is a European company. They fall under European regulation. That's hugely important. And that's the other thing, the other track that I had in my head before when we were talking about regulation. Oh, Europe can provide the regulation. No, we can only regulate when we're powerful enough to regulate. Emmanuel Macron, other than the sunglasses, for those of you who saw more than the sunglasses in that speech, has been calling for more European integration, more ability to act together. When Europe speaks with one voice, we are able to have a global voice. First of all, unity at the European level is incredibly important for us. Otherwise, we don't get to set any rules. To give a very stupid example, just to make sure that I'm being clear, because sometimes my head is faster than my mouth. It's the equivalent of having a child knock on the door at the entrance now and telling us, I had an idea for rules. It's cute, but we're not going to comply. So it goes back to sovereignty. We need to be powerful enough to be able to set our own rules. Otherwise, all of our GDPR and Cloud Acts and no, sorry, not Cloud, the EU AI Act and all of our regulations become optional. And this is not hypothetical, by the way. For the last 20 years, have foreign enterprises outside of Europe respected our rules? Was Brexit in line with our regulations? What happened? What happened? You know, what led us to Brexit? Was it in line with our regulations? Were our amazing politicians brilliantly lit by the Holy Father so that they could prevent this? No. Yeah, we haven't been respecting our regulation. We need to be strong enough to be able to set our regulation and say it. And now what we're doing is we're putting, at best, some fines to Elon Musk so we can say, look, guys, it's important.
Yeah, that's quite interesting. So we need to be powerful to be able to actually have a say. We cannot be the child walking up speaking about the regulations. So to be able to compete with the big boys, I believe that infrastructure is going to be a path. We currently have a large infrastructure gap in Europe. That is without a doubt. The question behind me was, do we even have enough for our sovereign scale? We see the answer is clearly no. Clara, I'm going to ask you, what do we need to have? Do we need more compute? Do we need data centers? Do we need edge capabilities? What do we need to have a sovereign AI at scale?
That's a great question. I personally would like to push back against that. Very resounding no, just a little bit. I think that there's a global shortage of AI infrastructure in general. I don't necessarily think that that is just tied to Europe. There are US companies that are struggling just as much as we are to find compute. It's more that the market demand has exploded over the last, those of you in the industry will know, over the last year. And the reality is that we are very reliant on certain provider to provide us this infrastructure. And right now there is more demand than there is compute. And that is true in the US, in Asia, and in Europe, just the same. We do have some of the largest GPU cloud providers in the world that are European-based. So the first and foremost, repeating the same point I made in the beginning, it's not a matter of when will Europe, if Europe will. Europe is. We are a competitor in AI infrastructure. And yes, there is an AI infrastructure shortage in Europe, as there is worldwide. That being said, I don't think, the regulation that Europe imposes, it's not trying to force the rest of the world to comply with that regulation. That's never the point. It's enforced on European companies. So what we need to do is continue to support the private enterprises that will expand the use of European infrastructure worldwide, and by virtue of being European, will therefore already be compliant. It's not about forcing an Asian or a United States or a South American company to comply with European regulation. It's about creating the resources through a private entity like Gcore and making that available for those companies to use. So if a South American company is then using Gcore's infrastructure, the infrastructure that they're using is GDPR compliant, not because that South American company is complying with EU regulation, but simply by virtue of using European infrastructure. So where the support needs to be then is the support for private enterprises. So that means funding for companies like Gcore, companies like Nebius. It's very expensive. We had this discussion just a few moments ago. It costs hundreds of millions, not tens of millions, to deploy large-scale AI infrastructure. And private enterprises aren't, just as much as we wish we were, sitting on free cash. So it requires initiatives that allow private enterprises to get funding at reasonable rates and to use that to expand their global footprint, their global infrastructure footprint. And that is where the US has us beat consistently. It is much easier for a US startup to get their pre-seed and first series funding than it is for a European company to do so. And that's really where I hope to see change in the future, is allowing more free market, allowing easier access to funding in Europe. That's really what is the game changer for a US company.
Wow, that's Quite perfect. So I'm seeing like quite a lot of like alignment here that like I've got like both of my panelists here agreeing that what we need is investment in Europe. We need like investment capabilities, investment infrastructure, and that will determine how we can proceed with Europe and what is next with the AI stack. Then I've got a question now when it comes to a regulated ecosystem. How do we see companies like Monnett building within or around European constraints? Do you call them constraints? Do you call them liberties? Do these constraints make it sovereign?
The constraints don't make it sovereign. The law is the law, and we respect it. That's it. We have an opportunity, because of the way that the laws have been created in this continent, at least in our union, to be more humane, more respectful of people's privacy, of people's lives. I don't see them as a constraint. I see them as inspiration on what we aspire to be as people in Europe. We still believe in privacy. Even the more youthful people among us, I'm talking about Katerina and Lucia over there, you know, you might have grown up at a time where privacy, the definition of privacy that I might have might be different to yours. But we still believe in privacy. We still believe that I go in my own home and I have my rights. I have my right to not be tracked. I have my right to not have a private company know everything that I'm doing. Recently, for various reasons, my Instagram algorithm started showing me completely different things. It knew exactly my mood. It knew exactly what I was feeling. It knew exactly how to sell me things that are completely private to me. Why does an algorithm get to know me so well? What I hope to achieve with my work, both political and private, is to awake in people a sense of empowerment in themselves. I don't see them as constraints, at least the regulations that you're speaking about, if I understand correctly. Yeah. I see them as an opportunity, guys, to build something better. We were talking about the Green Deal before. We kind of failed. I saw the question here, by the way. Yeah, we don't have enough energy in Europe to do that, and that is also part of sovereignty, right? But a more humane world is possible, and I think Europe stands for humanity. And so, you know, I thought politics was too slow, and I went into the private market, and I made a post. I just saw Andre gave me a nod before. Andre, I don't know if you heard what I said about you before, but the thing is, Mistrotz, I don't know if he's here tonight, introduced me to Andre Reitenbach, the CEO of Gcore, who's kindly hosting us today. Waking up every day and knowing that you employ 400, 500 people, or that you employ 5 people is a huge amount of stress. You're dealing with self-doubt every single day. And every single day you need to fight that self-doubt and say that you keep going. And we do that in pursuit of our humanity. We do that in pursuit of what we're building as companies. So I see regulation, whether our democracy is working perfectly or not, that's a different thing. But I see regulation as the expression of the will of our fellow Europeans. And it's not something for me to be constrained about. It's something it's my responsibility to say, this is what we have decided as a democratic society, and this is what I'm building on top of. And so if my regulation says X, it is my responsibility to keep pushing to make sure I create even better products, not pushing to see how much I can get away with. And of course, there are times where that requires you to make a product much, much harder. For example, you'll all have experienced the cookie buttons. We could have all lived without them, right? But again, regulations. The radio marks to say, yes, I can have marketing. Yes, I agree to privacy terms. Yes, all these things slow us down compared to our American competitors who come here, don't respect the regulations, just click next, you've signed up. So as long as we have an equal playing field, I don't see them as constraints. It's just that the law needs to be applied, and that's it. I don't know if I answered that question very well. I hope you got something out of it.
No, I think it was good, and actually inspired me for the upcoming question. I want to come back to the core, the Gcore, the core fundamental question which was at play here. And it all started with our first question of what is sovereignty? Is sovereignty a thing which we've got borders where we exclude some people and we operate within it? Is it a way of ownership, that who owns this? And if it is, then what is sovereign? Let's take the example of Luxembourg, right? We're here in Luxembourg today. Luxembourg has a strategic partnership with a particular AI company, Mistral AI. So what is considered the sovereign AI of Luxembourg? Is it considered Mistral AI, which they've got a partnership with? Or would it be Lëtz AI, which was developed from the ground up in Luxembourg through and through? Mistral, by the way, as a background, French company, French owned, but its largest shareholder is a Dutch company, ASML, the person who makes literally all the chip equipment to be able to make any type of chip. All of these NVIDIA chips, which everyone is so hot after, the machine that makes them is owned by this one small Dutch company.
Small?
Small in terms of, yeah, no, you know what, I'll actually go with small. Given it currently, grocery companies earn 10 times more money than this one, arguably for me, the most important company in the world. And so I think it is heavily undervalued, not financial advice. But I want to come back to the question really quick. Look, you've distracted me here. Lëtz AI versus Mistral AI. What is sovereign? What do we define as sovereignty? Is it ownership? Is it geographical boundaries? What is the sovereign AI of Luxembourg right now as of today, Clara?
I mean, the way that the question is posed almost makes it seem like I have to choose one. But I don't know if that's necessarily fair. I think Mistral AI and Lëtz AI, they operate under two fundamentally different principles and business cases. Both are sovereign, or at least Lëtz AI at the start. We're very proud to have hosted Lëtz AI on our infrastructure as they started. So they sovereign born, Luxembourgish company, Luxembourgish founder, Luxembourgish team using Luxembourgish infrastructure. So, it really can't get more sovereign than that. That being said, they're also compliant, GDPR, et cetera, being European. Mistral is also, we're close partners with Mistral. Very, very exciting to see how far they've come. I'm not sure if you watched Jensen's keynote speech. Mistral was mentioned several times. And we are extremely lucky and fortunate to be working with them, and very proud that this is a European company. So both are sovereign, but that kind of brings us back to Christos' answer to the first question: is what is sovereignty, and the freedom to build, the freedom to build the companies that that we want to, and not be regulated by the US. And I think that Mistral and Lëtz AI have both done that. I think it's exciting to know that Lëtz AI and Mistral both have a lot of use cases outside of the EU. So, we're really competing on the global stage. Yes, of course, they're sovereign, they're European. They are able to compete on the global stage and avoid a lot of the regulation imposed by the US and a lot of the business standards imposed by the US. So yeah, both are sovereign, and we're very proud of both.
Both are sovereign. When it comes to the discussion of the panel here, what I'm trying to find out is that what is the model which we want for our future cloud and AI? We're talking about sovereign cloud and AI infrastructure, and if Europe is ready. What is the model which we would want to follow when it comes to this, Christos? Do we want it through and through from the ground up from one company? Do we want that all of the European companies are all collaborating to be able to have this, and we've got ownership which is going beyond geographical borders and is spanning the whole of Europe? How do we envision this sovereign AI and cloud infrastructure in Europe?
If I understand the question correctly, I'd just say as long as I have European companies that are operating under EU law, then I'm very happy with that.
Both are sovereign? if we have to look at the Lëtz AI model, which is through and through from one country, compared to having the one of Mistral AI, which is spread over 3-4 countries, which could be considered sovereign. Like both are the model which you want to aim when it comes to cloud and AI infrastructure. Either is good.
As long as they're complying with EU law, yeah, I mean, I absolutely agree. I think it matters where the data is being hosted. Of course, if these companies decide to start hosting their data with U.S. companies, then of course that impacts sovereignty. I mean, with the Cloud Act, what is it? It's a clarifying lawful overseas use of data or something of the sort. So I mean, that means that if Google is impacted, for example, and a company is using Google, then their data will be potentially accessible by U.S. entities, by the U.S. government. So then it starts losing its sovereignty because it starts losing its freedom, and that's what we discussed in the beginning, is the definition of sovereignty. But I think, whether it's one European country or another, I mean, okay, then we're really getting to semantics of what is sovereign to Luxembourg or sovereign to Europe. But I don't know if that's the point of this discussion. So I truly think, as long as it's a EU company that the infrastructure is based, and the infrastructure that's used is based in the EU, or at least hosted by a company that is founded in the EU and complies with EU regulation, then yeah, that's sovereign.
From a political perspective, if I understand your question, as a European federalist, I would always prefer to see collaboration between companies in Europe, but this is a political answer, obviously. But a lot of what we talk about here is politics. I want to see our union strong, and that means that as long as we remain interdependent, because sometimes we take our union for granted. So it's a very good question. We need companies that are collaborating cross-border so that we keep the European spirit alive, and businesses are able to do that. So yeah, I would always be very, very happy to see companies that don't exist just in one national geographic location in Europe, but rather companies that are spread through countries and have cross-country collaborations.
Yeah, that's actually perfect. And also this a Cloud Act, which my panelists are talking about here, it defines its own sovereignty in 8 levels, starting with strategic sovereignty, which is, do these companies roughly align with what the EU stands for, going all the way up to literally everything is here in Europe, including the energy, the full supply chain, and that's level 8. And like what I'm hearing from Clara is that we can draw the line that we're pretty sovereign enough if we have the whole supply chain. So that's level 5 out of 8. So this is where we stand in terms of sovereignty and cloud infrastructure with AI. We're going to be wrapping up very soon. So what I'm going to be doing, something special. Okay, I'm going to be throwing questions quite literally to the audience, as in the audience has a choice of either asking a question to our panelists or answering their opinion of a question. Whoever catches this ball, feel free to catch a ball and say what you want. This is a lovely Gcore orange ball. And I'm just going to throw it out. If you don't want it, you know what? He's going to throw it out. And if you don't want it, you just give it to someone else who wants it. Okay? Because we want some audience interaction. We want to hear from you, and you have to decide what the future of AI and cloud infrastructure will look like here in Luxembourg, and then later, very soon, in the EU. Please take it away, Christos. Please, throw a question. Perfect. And do we have a question, or do you want to ask a question?
No, I have a couple. No. So regarding your first slide, so what was missing there was all about, okay, what is the major priority for a cloud company to retain its employees? The most important point there is vision. This is what is missing. And it's missing in US companies alike and European most of all. Because so far, having a direction on building a cloud company and having a strategy on how to build cloud infrastructure, how to link it with actually user requirement is a completely different thing. And you can see that if you compare the American hyperscalers, AWS working a different way than Google, different way than Microsoft, and that is missing. Right now, I think from the European data centers, I mean, we've got the opportunity now because all the spotlights are in building European infrastructure. It's a good opportunity to do that right. And so far, most of the European cloud infrastructure that we are reviewing, because we are working basically on the onboarding of applications into cloud infrastructure, there is no strategy in there. It's just a massive set of VMs or black boxes or bare metal devices. That's what I've been discussing with different, let's say, even Luxembourg-based data centers. I was surprised by the fact that when we're talking about data center services, they were just showing me the bare metal devices and the power engines or the possibility diesel engines that they have for a backup. So this vision is missing. That's the key factor. Not only, okay, of course you need to keep the employees happy, you need to build a really nice atmosphere, absolutely, but that's the first thing that needs to be there. Vision is missing.
Perfect. Thank you so much. So we need vision here. Yeah, Clara, would you like to add on?
I would love to respond to that. So yeah, first of all, I'm not making myself a crowd favorite to disagree with the crowd the whole time, but I really appreciate that comment. And I think that is true in certain cases. However, I'm not going to miss this opportunity to promote Gcore. Gcore's vision is indeed our software stack. So do we offer bare metal? Yes. But what we also offer is the software stack that enables companies to manage their infrastructure. So oftentimes when companies are looking to expand into AI infrastructure, what they're missing is the expertise to manage that infrastructure remotely, or the ability, if they're GPU providers, to allow for multi-tenancy, to allow for multiple clients to be on the same cluster with their data segregated and secure. What Gcore does is we have spent years developing a cloud software stack that enables the clients to monitor, to monetize their infrastructure remotely through a very easy platform. What we have decided to do in our vision is to not keep that solely to ourselves. We are not gatekeeping the software stack. Instead, we are licensing this for other companies to use. So if a company has thousands of GPUs that are sitting bare metal, we can deploy our cloud rack and our cloud stack, so the software layer, to sit on top of that infrastructure. They can manage that infrastructure all through a platform. They have a billing integration. They can monetize that infrastructure. And that is our vision, which allows it to not be a purely bare metal. Of course, this comes with access to Kubernetes, to Slurm, the easy training, scheduling, and management of that infrastructure. So Gcore is very proud to have that vision and to be providing that vision not only to European infrastructure providers, but also worldwide.
Wow, thank you so much. And thank you for your question. Please, we'll have 2 more ball throws. So just throw it to someone and they can decide if they want to ask a question or give their answer to a question. Just throw it to anyone.
Well, I had a question, Andrew, for those who know me. Don't you think it's also up to us here about a little bit like walk the talk, right? We're talking about sovereignty and how important it is to us and so on. And then maybe the idea is to choose those providers that are maybe less convenient, right? Less accessible, like easy accessible and 3 clicks via AWS, and choose European. Like it is up to us and where we put our money to have a future to let European companies have their sovereignty.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. Would you like to take this? I think it's going to be like a resounding yes from Christos.
Absolutely, please choose European. I mean, obviously Andrea represents another big cloud provider in Luxembourg. Choose European. Always choose European. Yeah, absolutely. The only thing I can tell you for sure, thank you, is that we need to develop better products. Gcore needs to be better than their competitors. Monnett needs to be better than our competitors, because at the end of the day, people decide, the market decides, right? We talk about the market overall, and the market decides. So our products need to be better. And that's a responsibility. That's what we're doing. I was having a conversation with Marco on Sunday, and we ended up getting spiritual, which we often do, Marco. And for personal reasons, wow, I deviate a lot. For personal reasons, the last 3-4 months, I started attending my church a lot more often. I promise it has to do with the question. And it has to do with my company as well. And I believe in a God that sent his son to teach us one thing in 3 ways. You don't have to share my belief in God or my God, but this is what comes out, and this is what we embody in our company as well. I believe in a God that wanted to teach us love, to teach us to love ourselves, which is very, very difficult, but we all work on it, to teach us to love others, and to teach us to love our enemies. And whether you believe in a God or not, I think the whole point of it is that everything we do, the essence of what we do, is to learn our own humanity. Now, why do I take that from there? To take our own humanity. We're talking about artificial intelligence tonight a lot. But we are all incredibly capable human beings, full of intelligence and full of our ability to grow and learn ourselves and develop ourselves. We don't always need AI. And our company, Monnett, or Monnett, the company that we're building, the grand vision of Monnett is not just to build a social network. This is what we start, an app. Our vision is to build a human layer of the internet. In an internet that is filled with AI and with bots and agents, we are starting with an app, but we're building the human layer of the internet because I still believe our humanity, ourselves, our expression of self needs to exist in this digital world that has become part of our daily life. And so choosing European doesn't just become choosing European, but rather going back to all the questions that we had before about what we have regulations for and what we get inspired from regulations. Choosing European for me means choosing the companies that are building for humanity in a world that I think has kind of lost the sense of where we're going. My father was an economist. He always used to tell me, don't worry about technology because technology doesn't replace people. Technology comes and it empowers us. There's a lot of fear about AI replacing us. I think choosing European in 2026 and moving forward should be all about building the better companies that use AI, that use European cloud, that use whatever it is that we
Wow, that was amazing. That was amazing, Christos. Can you believe we've gone from sovereignty to spirituality? This panel really does have it all. And then to close us off, please send off the ball. You can throw it as hard as you like. It's very soft.
I told them I have no hand-eye coordination, so I am sorry.
Wherever it lands, it lands. Congratulations. You can ask the last question here.
Not know if I have a question, but I can maybe share a bit of correction about the 75 million information you mentioned. Actually, it's only a small part of European investment in AI today. And it's actually several hundred billions of, billions of investment that are done in AI in Europe. So we are competitive in that sense.
Yeah, that's true. That's very good. And we've got it back to Clara. Clara, any closing thoughts? Because the ball has landed with you.
Good, sure. Well, in the cohesive spirit, European spirit, I'm going to take this opportunity to again disagree with the crowd. We had a question that is now passed about what the biggest constraint is for AI infrastructure, and the resounding response was energy. I'm not entirely sure if that's the truth. The energy exists on the grid, and where there is demand, there will be supply. There is no shortage of energy on the grid, and there won't be going forward because there will be heavy investments in it. Now, where there is perhaps a shortage is in the infrastructure to deliver this energy across the grid, in substations, in grid efficiency. And while energy prices are still more expensive, this is an area in Europe, this is an area where we do have the US beat. The United States is notoriously behind in infrastructure and in grid infrastructure, in interstate collaborations and federal collaborations, and in upgrading of the substations to break the power down into deliverable units to the end users. So this is where, again, regulation has prevailed. The grid in Europe has always been very future focused. It did cause delays early on. I mean, of course, there's a different starting point for Europe and the US, so I'm not trying to say this is, European superiority, but the reality is that we do have a very future-focused grid. We do have inter-country collaborations to upgrade the grid and to make sure that these substations are ready for the next generation of power delivery. So this is an area where I think Europe has great promise. So to leave on a positive note, not only are we already there, as you mentioned, with European infrastructure, but we are prepared for the future in some ways, even more so than our US competitors. That's it.
Thank you so much. So there we have it, guys. Here, this was our panel on sovereign cloud, sovereign AI. Is Europe ready for its own sovereign infrastructure? We heard that Europe needs investment. Europe needs a vision. Europe needs regulation. Compute, all of this is out of the window. Everyone's struggling with that. But these are the core things which we have, which we're following, which we need. So I'd like to have a big round of applause for my panelists here. We've got Christos here from Monnett. Real humans, real connections, real people. And of course, the lovely Clara from Gcore. Who doesn't know about Gcore? Come on. Thank you all for being here today, and thank you all for attending this panel. I'll see you guys soon at the drinks.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for coming in. Thank you so much, Clara, Christos, and of course, thank you so much, and enjoy the rest of your evening. You have some drinks to drink, and we have some food to eat. Thanks. I think in my mind, everything that goes for all over.